Hello, happy Tuesday, happy December. I can't believe we're in the last month of the year. I am your host, Sherrell Dorsey, here with Plugged In here on the Impact Alpha platform. Thank you for joining in with us. And also, good morning to those of our friends who are still on the West Coast, and good evening to those who are in London and beyond. I'm really excited about today's conversation. This is actually the last in our series of this year, and we have the privilege of having Andres Baehr with us from Savia Ventures. I just want to share just a little bit about how I got connected with Andres. I was doing a stint in Mexico City, and I had been reaching out to various folks in the tech ecosystem, particularly the climate tech ecosystem. And Andres is one of the first folks in the VC, the climate VC landscape to get back to me and take me up on my offer for coffee. And since then, I have been just following his work, and he's just done such an amazing job with pulling me into the community of this amazing conversation happening across LATAM from an investment perspective, as well as these incredible startups that are building the future of so many incredible both technologies and materials that are leading us to a better planet. Andres, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be here. I didn't know it was the last session of the year as well.
Yeah,
Exciting.
absolutely. You're closing us out. So last but certainly not least, so Latin America, is your domain in so many ways. You've been investing across Latin America for a while now, and Savia Ventures is actually one of the most prominent VC firms in Latin America that's investing in incredible founders. And one of the most insightful things that I've learned over the last few months, going to various countries in Latin America, is this kind of growing. It feels like the ecosystem is growing with all this great energy and opportunity and knowledge. Even about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, you and your firm hosted Climatica and just continue to open this perspective of what's happening across Latin America, how folks are starting to work together and also find solutions for funding challenges for these incredible entrepreneurs and businesses and even communities that have dynamic solutions for Latin America across energy, across waste, across so many things. Can you talk a little bit about over just this last year, how has this climate changed?
Good question. There has been a few changes we've seen from the perspective of Savia Ventures, and maybe for context, just a very brief on Savia. So we're a climate VC firm, as you mentioned, focused on early stage startups that have a link to Latin America, and where we share this common belief that was a bit more delusional 2 years ago. Now it's changing.
Yeah,
That Latin America is the largest untapped climate market at the moment,
yeah,
in terms of convergence and a series of different factors. What we've seen different, one is in terms of what's happening in the US has impacted LATAM in ways that we're not expecting. One is Savia, for example, was born mainly from the thesis, which still stands, that it's a hotbed for climate solutions that are born here and with founders that establish themselves in either Silicon Valley, Europe. We have cases in our portfolio that has happened, but now we're seeing a lot of founders from outside of the region moving into LATAM. We were
yeah,
not expecting that amount of inbound and influx of deal flow into the region. That's one large scale change we've seen. And secondly, I would say that changes in administration in the US, especially, for example, budgeting cuts,
yeah,
including the IRA, USAID, they have impacted LATAM in a way that founders in LATAM have not been used to subsidies, and a lot of the solutions have been born without subsidies or with very little amount of subsidies. So it kind of has presented a certain advantage to
yeah,
the
yeah.
ecosystem.
Are you seeing any at all investors, particularly in the US, that are coming into LATAM and just saying, hey, listen, like the US market is really tough right now in this space. So now we actually want to invest in funds that are reaching across LATAM from a climate perspective?
We've seen quite a few that are diversifying. Yes. Uh,
Yeah.
some like the ones you met here in the event in Mexico, which was done in collaboration with other entities. I don't want to make it sound like Saya was the main host. Such as SOSV, they have had presence in Latam for a while.
Yeah.
Another fund that's also doing the exploration work. They likely have a decision by now, but they want to install a hub here. Is Breakthrough Energy Ventures.
Hmm.
So they did a similar task in Asia, where they
Yeah.
installed a hub for their incubator, and they were looking at that in Latin America. I don't know where that is at now, but that exploration work is still ongoing. Um, and we've seen other funds that are also expanding their thesis and doing this. I just had a chat this morning with a fund the European fund established in LA, where they do this two-thirds Europe, two-thirds US, and then they go a third global. And that global portion, we see it more and more focused in the region in Latin America.
Yeah. For those of you who are in the room, I just want to take a little break and say again, thank you for joining us. If you're investing in LATAM or even considering it, please definitely like drop your info into the chat, where you're tuning in from today and or also the firm you're representing. I'm just super curious about who's starting to have their eyes on LATAM. So please definitely use the chat. And also if you have questions for Andres as we get towards the end of the chat, I want to make sure you toss them in there as well. Okay, Andres, I want to go into the conversation about the advantage now that LATAM has. And the your core thesis is really about this kind of unapologetically like bold backing of founders who might be too intense or too complex for traditional VC. So now what does that actually look like in practice? And why is this intensity an advantage for LATAM founders?
Yeah, a large part of our thesis comes from the founder angle, where we've seen it in practice, as in founders in the region have been creating solutions uh, in an environment where they need to be resilient, they need to be frugal. There's, as I mentioned,
Mhm.
lack of subsidies. They are experts on um, managing inflation,
Mm,
regulatory frameworks. So most of the founders here do not operate in their own home countries. There's a lot.
yeah.
The region is highly dynamic. This is something it takes some time to explain to a lot of investors outside of the region. And they have all these traits that allow them to spin out of Latam, and we look for that in our portfolio, and we have success stories already of founders raising Series A or Series B, uh, and we've invested in what in the last 18 months
Hmm.
in Europe or the US with operations there. Um, so that core resilience, it's one of the drivers, but you also
Hmm.
have a whole range of macro um, factors that come into play that also favor where Latam is now, from being part of the supply chains of Europe and the US, holding 50% of lithium deposits, 60% of biodiversity is here, the largest carbon sinks, the supply, as I mentioned, supply chains from either large corporates or corporates that are doing mineral extraction are all linked to LATAM.
Hmm.
And also, security in supply chains has made a lot of difference in the last few years. So Latin America is away from a lot of the supply chains that are under risk of conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to dive into that just a little bit because you spoke to some of these natural resources and I think natural materials that seem to provide a sense of advantage. So where are you seeing are some of the most investable opportunities beginning to emerge, like bio-based materials? You spoke to mining, maybe even like distributed energy or what have you. What's kind of like making the solutions very distinctive than kind of what we're seeing in the US market?
It's a good question. No, where we see the largest opportunity is the whole industrial sector.
Hmm.
So Latin America is highly industrialized. It's nearshoring is still growing in Mexico and Central America, and at the same time, it provides the fact that it has this 60% of the world's biodiversity. It is it has all the capital for nature-based solutions and other adjacent technologies we look at in terms of natural capital inventory, carbon sinks, biodiversity credits are getting tested in LATAM as well.
Hmm.
So that's where they get the advantage from the resources standpoint.
Yeah. The biodiversity credits, is that coming strictly from government support, or is that like some kind of larger entity that's providing these kind of subsidies?
It's both, and both are being uh, the carbon market, as you know, it's still under development. It's not
Hmm.
perfect, but we've seen cases like Pachama, Argentinian founder. That company was
Yeah.
acquired, what, 3 weeks ago or a month
Oh,
ago?
nice.
And even he said, I think the market is not perfect. It's evolving, but it's the closest we've had to putting a price on nature.
Hmm.
And the theory, we don't know where it's going to go, but the theory is that biodiversity credits will be the next frontier. And now there's public-private initiatives working on this development.
Yeah, amazing. I want to go ahead and take a question from the Q&A, and then it looks like we have one in the chat as well. Fernando Salazar asks, Andres, how has been the engagement around VCPE from the banking sector in LATAM? And how have you seen de-risking mechanisms attracting incumbent credit players?
No, great question. We have, but it has happened more at the infrastructure, say climate infrastructure play. So when we're talking solar, hydrogen projects, uh,
Hmm.
we've seen more presence of blended finance models. Banks are very keen to get involved in climate tech, but at the moment the risk profile is still a bit high for where most of the startups in the region are at. So most are in seed and Series A. You could say that. And banks usually, and this is the whole range from Santander, HSBC, BBVA, a lot of the banks that are based in outside of LATAM, their headquarter, they have by mandate to invest more in, let's call it green technologies,
Mm.
but the risk profiles are still a bit high. Um,
So more later say
in,
they're focused
in
on more later
yeah,
stage
in
companies of a
relation
bit more
to
proven.
in relation to where the startups are at.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you for the question, Fernando. All right, Dr. Philippe Dion asked if Latin America has some of the planet's richest natural climate assets, as well as the fastest renewable energy growth, what will investors miss out on by waiting to invest?
By waiting, sorry?
By
Uh,
waiting to invest, what will they miss out on?
it's same as fintech. So uh, Latin America allegedly holds about 25% of the world's fintechs. So that market was ready to leapfrog, and it did. Who won the who got the highest returns? The investors that came in early. Climate
Yeah,
is in the same position now. It has
yeah,
all the ingredients to leapfrog into this next stage where the investors that come in early are the ones that are investing at very low valuations compared to what we see in the US or Europe, and that are scaling into developed markets where we plan to have the liquidity events as well. So they're missing out on the returns basically.
yeah. It's like the earlier the better, right?
Yeah.
Um, so what's interesting too is that you've worked with Impact Alpha a lot. We believe in the power of storytelling in this space because climate storytelling has sort of largely been very doom and gloom. And so on this side of things, we're looking at actual solutions on a global scale that are, and I think again to your point, like all right, at some point there's going to be liquidity events for all these incredible companies that are providing real scalable solutions, creating jobs, creating like the next industries for many of these places and environments. But one of the things that I love about the Savvy approach to both community and this emphasis of storytelling is that it kind of differs a bit from kind of traditional VC models, right? And it seems to be pretty essential for the way in which you all operate. Can you talk about why like storytelling has been kind of key to the way that you all have built and, also work with your portfolio companies?
We see it double-sided. One is in the sense that we do what from the outset we wanted a community-driven fund, and the community aspect is linked towards storytelling, and it's what you saw in Climatica, for example. So
Yeah.
starting an event with a rap battle and bringing a photographer from the Amazon, combined with roundtables on prototyping to scale. The why we do it that way is that we do believe that, and there's other VC firms that are harnessing this as well. Investors are want more than returns nowadays. As in, that's our primary metric, financial
Hmm.
returns. But there's also a strategic value add that a lot of investors are looking for. And community plays a key role there, community and storytelling. And actually, this trend, it's way more practiced by startups, where some have actually stated that the new marketing is going to be community building.
Yeah. Yeah.
Funds are a bit behind that, and a lot of funds still have the mindset of a quarterly report will be enough. Maybe for some investors it is, but a lot of investors, from what we've seen, want a bit more than that. Want
Yeah.
engagement, maybe want learning on VC, want to be involved with the founders. So that's why we've woven into the whole thesis, storytelling and community building.
Mhm. I want to go to, thank you. I want to go to the Q&A again here. Ryan Taylor asks, it's clear that more capital needs to flow to funds in LATAM. What do LPs need to understand about investing in LATAM to gain more confidence about investing in VC funds in LATAM? And then alternatively, what do you think LPs are missing about the climate funds being developed in LATAM?
Great question. On the first one, it LATAM is the largest opportunity, but as an investor, you need to know how to navigate it. So that's the first one, as in to immerse yourself in the LATAM ecosystem, knowing the basics, as in you have one continent called Brazil, another continent, Spanish-speaking LATAM,
Hmm.
and Brazil has 20 different countries in it. They're not countries, but they're very different states. Spanish-speaking LATAM is very different to speak with an investor in Chile than in Mexico or Peru. You need to start getting acquainted with that type of how to navigate the ecosystem.
Yeah,
Um, I'd say one is to look at it as a region. We as Saya, whenever advocate investing in Mexico or in Chile or in Brazil, we look at it as a region, and that diversifies risk, because it's a region where there's a lot of moving pieces. And if, say, a market like Chile collapsed for any reason,
yeah,
our startups have full mobility and are operating in different countries. So that's another big piece that needs to be taken into account, the de-risk factor, because
yeah,
the perception of risk is usually higher than what we believe it should be. And in terms of climate funds, my take is that this is an opportunity ripe for the taking. As in, we wish there were more Savias out here, more firms we could co-invest with. But most of the deployments are coming from corporates and single family offices, actually.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that leads me to my next question about what would your call to action be to US impact investors about the opportunity to begin investing in Latin America, either directly or through, the funds that are currently serving the market? What are the things that you would want them to understand right now?
One is it can be via funds or it can be direct. Directly, it has the challenge that you need to know the region in more detail.
Hmm.
Uh, Another option that we encourage a lot is co-investing. We bring to the table a lot of co-investors and are very open on sharing deal memos or anything that facilitates bringing more financing to the region. That's our end goal here. Because the market in Latam is there's no fighting elbow with elbow for deals. It's the opposite. So there's a
Yeah.
oversupply of startups and only a few buyers. So no, co-investing, I think it's a good alternative. Um, and share risk. We do it with a
Hmm.
lot of US funds at the moment. And if not, for deeper involvement, it could be investing in funds in Latam as well.
Yeah.
I would uh, I would look at the normal factors, but also look at the thesis behind, as in how regional the founders are. Other funds like Gabriel was a fund of funds, used to be operating. They were against what they call the airplane investor, for example, as in investors that are foreign to the region. That's something to be aware of. Um,
Mhm.
to be working with managers that are very familiar with the landscape here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you highlighted too, kind of building a cultural competency in these different regions because not every region is the same, right? And so one of the things I was very fortunate about connecting with you was having the opportunity to come to Climatica and to meet all kinds of companies from the CEOs to co-founders who were present, coming from a variety of different contexts, who were even themselves moving from one part of Latin America into launching, or scaling into another area, and even saying for themselves that, they are having to learn to do business very differently in those areas. One of the things we kind of backstage, we were chatting about with some of the conferences that you've recently attended. I think you said you were in Guadalajara at some point, and Barcelona. I'm curious of which conferences you are prioritizing that you feel like have a really, really strong thread on this space that we might want to think about as we look ahead for 2026, as either wants to watch or investor impact investors here in the room might want to prioritize attending if they want to dive in a bit deeper.
Good question. With regard to the conference I just attended, yeah, the main ones were Barcelona Smart Cities Expo. That's 25,000 people. I spoke at the World Ocean Summit. So they're placing a very strong focus now on blue economy in Latin America, coming from Europe. And the second one was the Clean Tech Group Forum, which takes place in the US as well, and where a lot of the conversation is now expanding from decarbonize Europe to decarbonize Europe's supply chain. Same
Mhm.
applies to the US. So the supply chains, in the case of Europe, more than it's about 70% of the minerals used for batteries in Europe is coming from Latam. I think this is, the supply chain is highly attached to the region. Same applies to the US. And conferences, we're trying to say no, more no and no to conferences, because as you know, conferences, they take up a lot of focus. If I was to recommend just a few, in February in Mexico, you have the Latin American Impact Investing Forum. It's called FLII, FLII. We can share the website afterwards. That outside is the largest impact investing conference taking place in Latam, and it's here in Mexico. So a flight from Merida to New York, Miami, I don't think it's more than 2, 3 hours. And the other ones, self-promoting here, will be doing two climáticas next year, one likely in a region of Mexico and one in Sao Paulo, where
Amazing.
we go
Amazing.
for the same format you saw, as in smaller events. And we have other entities that are interested now in being part of this, that are
Yeah,
more conducive for relationship building, and where the central point is lifting LATAM as a um, hotbed for climate solutions.
absolutely. No, thank you for those recommendations and at least a bit of guidance in terms of navigating, especially for those again who are in the room who are potentially looking at LATAM as a potential investment opportunity. I want to thank you again, Andres, for joining us. I know that you've been a longtime friend of Impact Alpha, so we are just very, again, fortunate to close out our series this year with you, with your voice, and also the incredible work that you're doing across the region. What's the best way for folks to get in touch with you? If they're interested in either future information and or potentially working with Savia down the line.
Straight up LinkedIn email. Happy to share it. We're
Amazing. All
very
right.
open on that front.
Amazing. We can drop it down here in the chat. And then also, before everyone jumps off and returns to their afternoon, if you are not getting the Impact Alpha Open, I need you to go right now to impactalpha.com/open to get Impact Alpha Open delivered to your inbox. You can sign up. It's free weekly newsletter, crisp, expert curated investment briefing that lifts up people, data, tools, trends, even job opportunities. So it helps you stay ahead of the curve. And you'll also know when we have future conversations with folks like Andres. So again, that's impactalpha.com/open. And I believe Isaac has dropped that into the chat. So you can quickly sign up. And for those of you who join us a little bit later, we will be having a recap video so you can watch in. And if you left early, again, we'll have a recap video to share. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It looks like folks are also dropping in their LinkedIn, so please definitely connect with Savia, with others who've joined in this call, and thank you for everyone as well who asked questions during the conversation. Andres, we are beyond grateful. Thank you again.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Amazing. And thank you, Isaac, our trusty producer who keeps the train going and
Thank you,
going.
Isaac.
Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of the afternoon.